Hello, chess family, and today we're going to be going over the New Year's Open 2022 over there at Complete Chess. So let's take a look. As usual, it's me, National Master Jesse James. First round is going to be actually me versus Aadhi, one of my previous students. So let's see how this game went. I was the white pieces. So we start off with e4, c5. I always love to play against a Sicilian. Pawn to d4. Here I did decide I would like to try the Smith-Morra Gambit. Aadhi seemed to be well prepared with his chess coach, and they played c takes d4, pawn c3, and then knight to f6. Now this is a very good decision. This is actually going to kind of switch over to a Alapin opening. And yeah, I think this is a very good way to play. A lot of people will play the pawn to d3, which I'm very happy to play against, because I'll simply just play pawn to c4 and switch into a Marathi bind. So the Alapin, I'm still learning how to play that one, so yeah, I think it was a good practical decision, at least this time, right? So knight f6 attacking the pawn, pawn attacks on e5, knight d5, and here I played bishop c4, which is one of the top moves in this position, knight b6, bishop b3. Now here, they could take the pawn with d takes c3, but this kind of goes against the reason why they played this opening, right? I mean, they chose not to take the pawn earlier in the Smith-Morra. So here I would just simply play knight takes c3, and it shows white has a decent advantage here at 0.6, and yeah, I'd be very much happy playing this. You know, I was already ready to gamble a pawn. I'm still ready to gamble that pawn in this opening. So here he goes ahead and plays the best move in this position, which is pawn to d5. At this point, white really only has one good option here. We have to take on d6. If you do try to play c takes d4, this is not going to be the position for you because, well, this is basically your French position, except black's going to be able to bring the bishop outside the pawn chain. So black just has a great position here. In fact, I definitely like black in this position because the bishop's going to be getting out, and it's going to be really hard to kingside attack. The c file is already open, and d4 is already weakness. So here you have to play for the isolated pawn, which I'm perfectly happy to play with. Queen takes on d6, c takes d4. So far, so normal, right? We continue with bishop f5. Typically, I think this is already one of the inaccuracies. Typically, you play knight c6 first here, developing and attacking the pawn. And then white has a few different moves here. Knight e2, which is a better try here. If you do play knight f3, this is the reason why we delayed the bishop, was because we want to bring the bishop out to g4 to pin the knight. And if we can trade off the knight, then d4 becomes very weak. So knight e2 typically gets played here. So bishop g4 does get tried. We can play pawn to f3 and just kick this away. And yeah, it's a chess game. So here he played bishop f5, which, like I said, is already a little inaccurate. So we just continue. Knight to f3. Bishop takes on b1. This is quite a surprise for me. It took me a second to see the idea. Hopefully you spotted what Aadhi was thinking here. Well, obviously I need to take back. I was like, am I losing something here? Did I fall for a check? Well, Aadhi had an idea here, which was after rook takes queen to g6. I sat here for a second, and here hopefully you see that the g2 pawn and also the rook on f1 are both being attacked. Obviously, we're going to want to keep our rook over here. And so here I did see that he actually can take the pawn from a refutation. Unfortunately for him, he did miss this. Man, there's some crazy ideas here with knight to e5. To be honest, I did not even take a look at this, but knight e5 would have been a move to play. If the queen takes on b1, bishop takes on f7, check, king to d8, and wow, the computer's just saying, let's just go ahead and castle, and we're just up in so much development here. We should have a strong attack. Definitely did not play this line. Although I do believe in my skills, I don't believe it to this level. Maybe I could win it, but I don't think that it's necessary. I'll say it like that. That's definitely a computer line. So here after queen g6, I saw a tactical idea, so I went ahead and continued my development. I played bishop f4, and here he took on g2, and now white just has a winning position here. Hopefully you can spot the tactical idea. White has so much development here. There's got to be something good to play here. Here I played the second best move. I played it out of order. But hopefully you see the idea. Here the best move to play was actually rook to g1. And here the queen cannot go to g6, obviously, because of that. There's only one free move, which is h3. But this is very bad because of bishop takes on f7 check with the knight g5 check, forking and winning the queen. Here Aadhi missed this, and yeah, he just tried to go pawn grabbing. I always recommend to castle before you try to go pawn grabbing, but yeah, this just did not work out for him. Here I did it out of move order here, so I actually played bishop takes f7 first check, and king takes, and then rook g1. And I can definitely understand why the other variation was better. It keeps more pieces on the board for the attack. Well, here the queen's trapped. Of course, if the queen goes to h3, the knight g5 check gets played, and the queen's lost. So takes and takes. Although Aadhi was able to get the 3 pieces for the queen, even the pawn, this is still a very, very bad position. Why? Well, black's just too bad in development here. All the pieces are pretty much asleep here. So I just played some pretty, normal moves of developing and making threats. Here he played an interesting move, knight to d7. I guess his plan was to try and bring the knight to f6 to guard over some checking ideas. Of course, I'm going to bring my knight back in the game. The knight e5 square is so juicy. Maybe even knight g5 to get to the c6 square is so juicy. He went ahead and played h6. And I played knight to e5 check. Knight takes, bishop takes. This removes one of the defenders that was going to be very good for him on f6, and also opens up my queen for the attack. Now there's many forks here that I'm threatening. Queen f3 check, maybe even queen h5 check, queen b3 check. There's so many things. This king is just not ready for the attack. He went ahead and played king e8 here, which is another inaccuracy. And here I found one of the best ways to reply to this position. I played queen to h5 check first. This goes ahead and brings the king to a more vulnerable position. King goes to d7, another inaccuracy. I think king to d8 was definitely a better square here. And he goes to d7, and now we see why this is an inaccuracy. The queen just goes to f3, and there's no good way to defend the pawn here. And this is pretty much game over now. I mean, the pieces never got into the game. Yeah, this is just going to be game over. So here he played king back to e8, just took on b7. Now the threats may be something like queen c6 check. Although I did have a more sinister plan at this time. He played rook g8. I guess he's trying to free his pieces with g5. But here, hopefully, you see the next move we're going to be doing to win some more material. Hopefully you spotted it. It's just the simple bishop to c7 here. Here the idea is we want to just trade off, and then we'll take the rook. And the rook is trapped. There's really nowhere to move to. Here computer's just saying play pawn g6, and yeah, this is just not going to be any good. Your bishop takes, and then we'll take the rook next over here. At this point, after bishop c7, he did go ahead and resign. That was my first round against Aadhi. That's why this video is called Sacrifice to the Chess Gods. The first round is top half versus bottom half, so the games are going to be very, they're going to be unequal here. Here I'm a master, and I'm playing against a 1400. Let's check out the second game. This is against actually one of my students, Mahit, and he's playing against Cristian. Cristian actually ended up tying for first place in the tournament. Let's see how he does it with his first round. Here we start off with d4, d5, pawn c4, e6, very nice and classical kind of Queen's Gambit. Knight c3, knight f6, pawn takes on d5, e takes d5. Here we're going to those kind of Carlsbad kind of structures. White does very well in these positions. Knight to f3, bishop to e7, and pawn to e3 here. Here you can definitely think about bringing your bishop out over to g5. We want to bring the bishop outside the pawn chain before we start doing this. So pawn to e3 gets played, castles, bishop to d3. One of the ideas taking away the best space for this bishop. Pawn c6 and pawn to h3. This is a nice move here which takes away the g4 square. In these kind of positions, though, I kind of prefer not putting the knight to f3, but actually to e2. And I'll tell you why. Is after we go something like, let's go e3, bishop e7, bishop d3, castles, and then we can put the knight to e2 here. There's three main plans in these kind of positions for white. We have the minority attack, where we play the rook over and we start pushing our pawns forward. It's a very nice idea. We have the h3 idea, which is kind of waiting around to see what happens. And then there's the last idea with the pawn to f3. And the idea is to play pawn e4 to go for the center. So this keeps a lot of options open here. And of course, the bishop g4 is, white can get some free temples against this and get that e4 plan going. So the knight to f3 is already not a very well played, not the best way to play in this position. So knight f3, and this is already giving white, yeah, not too good of a position here. So bishop e7, pawn e3, here we go, and pawn h3 gets played. Rook to e8, we go ahead and castle here. As far as most things have gone, this is an equal position. White's pawn structure is very solid. White will typically go for their kind of king side, or they can go queen side, or even the center. This is why white does so well in these positions. There's so many things to do. Black has definitely a hard time in these kind of positions finding out what to do. They can definitely try to play like b6, c5, and this is an active way of playing, but after d takes, the pawn can become isolated, or they get the hanging pawn's position, in which case white again has targets that they can just attack. Knight b to d7, bishop to d2. Yeah, not one of my top moves here, but it's a move to play. Knight to f8. This is a very standard maneuver that gets played. The knight can go to g6 or to e6 here. Rook to c1. Again, I think at this point white was pretty much out of their prep and just playing normal-looking moves. Unfortunately, with this bishop d2, rook c1, what's the plan with these? Already black is already slightly better in this position. I would favor maybe the rook b1 idea in this position and go for the minority attack, as well the e4 move is going to take quite a while to do as the knight's in the way. So rook c1 got played, bishop d6. Black has now opened up the bishop and the rook is going over here, stopping any kind of e4 ideas. Mahit goes ahead and tries to play it anyways. He goes to queen c2, g6 gets played. This is a very normal move in these kind of games. The bishop looks at playing f5. Not right now, as the bishop would just take, but typically they'll go up like knight e6, g7, and then bishop f5, as I've seen in a Kasparov game. And whenever you can trade off this bishop, then you can really stop them from playing pawn to e4. Well, Mahit did not want to wait, and he goes ahead and plays e4 right away. A double-edged move here. It does open up the game so that you can make some attacks, but you are getting this isolated pawn. And yeah, Cristian's very happy for this, and he goes ahead and takes. Of course, we can't let this pawn be pushed forward because, I mean, even if you do bring the bishop back, e5, white has a very nice pawn structure, attacking pawn structure here, and black's going to have a hard time in this position. Yeah, white's center is just too strong here. So we got to take and dismantle this. So takes and then takes, bishop takes. Yeah, black's doing very well here. He'll now start playing against this isolated pawn. Bishop e6, finishing up his development. Pawn to a3. Not really necessary in this position. I'm not sure why this move was played. Here there are weak squares on the king side that you might think about trying to play against. I like the rook over to d1 also, maybe rook e1. You just got to play active in these positions. When you have the isolated pawn, it's a weakness, and if you go into the end game, you're just going to be worse, if not just forced lost here. So, pawn a3 got played, bishop to e7, bishop c3, maybe ideas about playing d5 and trying to open this. Knight to d7 gets played. You can see the knight's going to be trying to get either to f6 or b6 to control the d5 square, which is very common in these isolated pawns. You control the square in front of it. After that, if you can trade down to endgame, again, you should just be winning these ones. Rook to e1, knight to f6, and knight to g5. Oof. It is a creative move here. I'm not sure if I'd be willing to part with my light square bishop, though. Bishop to d5. A nice move here, just making some trades. It's okay if we can go ahead and trade up the bishop for the bishop, but you definitely don't want to let them play the knight takes. He did have a line here that if you do try to take on e4, now we have knight takes e6 in intermezzoa. So, yeah, we're attacking the queen here, so there's no time to try and grab other pieces. And after pawn takes, white's definitely better in this position with the isolated pawn that is backwards on an open file. Yeah, I think we actually would take with the rook here, triple up, and then maybe do Alekhine's gun, and yeah, that's going to be very hard to hold if possible. So, bishop d5 was played, a very good move. Again, getting control over the d5 square and making some more trades. The more trades, the better. Bishop to f3, queen to d7, knight to e4, and rook a to d8. Black is so happy here. He's got everything he wants in the position. His pieces are all developed. White really hasn't shown a plan in this position, unfortunately. Knight to f6 check. Black's happy. Get more trades, the better. Bishop takes on f6. Bishop takes on d5. And of course, we're going to take back with our queen. Hopefully no one here was even thinking about taking back with the pawn, because now you're about equal position, because now the pawn structure is the same, and, well, what weakness do you have to attack here, right? So queen takes d5 gets played. Rook takes. And yeah, this is boiled down to just losing the pawn on d4 now. And Cristian shows good technique on doing this. Rook goes to d1 to defend. Rook to d8. Rook to d2. Rook e8. Rook d1. h5. Nice little waiting move over here. Queen to d3. And now there's really no good try against this rook d8. It says here white resigns. I'm not sure if that's completely true, but here I can definitely understand why. Black is going to have some c5 ideas in here and just kind of push up over here. I'm not even sure what the time situation in the game. But I can definitely tell you black is better in this position. All right, on to the last game. This is Jonathan Rea, and I assume it's pronounced Prasanna. Prasanna tied with Cristian to win the tournament for it. So let's see how he does it in this game. In this game, he plays against one of our local players, Jonathan Rea. And unfortunately for Jonathan, he just gets destroyed. So let's see how this went. We started with knight f3, knight f6, pawn c4, e6, g3, b6. Jonathan goes ahead and plays this kind of, what is this, a Queen's Indian. Here they're going to be battling over the e4 square. These positions are pretty interesting. It's already giving white a better win rate here with 38% win rate for white, with only a dismal 18% win rate here for black. And this is from the Lee chess studies. So bishop g2 gets played, bishop b7, castles, bishop b7, knight to c3, castles, and pawn to b3. That's an interesting move right here. Typically, I would think I would be seeing pawn to d4. Rook e1 is one of the most played moves in this position, threatening to play e4 in one go. At that point, black is pretty much forced to play d5 here to stop the e4 from getting played. But this is a very rich position, and Prasanna goes ahead and plays just pawn to b3 here. A very nice idea. He's just going to bring out his bishop and kind of wait around to see what his lower rated opponent will do. d6 gets played. Yeah, I can definitely tell you, I've seen a lot of Jonathan's game, and he definitely favors these kind of ideas. He's basically trying to play that Nimzo Indian idea, where you put the knight to d7 and play his pawn to e5. And it's a very solid structure here. Bishop goes to b2. Knight b to d7. Now we're seeing a win rate here for white at 63%, so we definitely know something's up in this position. Queen to c2. Pawn to c5. And here, rook f to d1, which makes plenty of sense here. Looks like he's getting ready to play his pawn to d4 here. The problem that he might have in this, and he plays a weird move to me later on, is that after d4, if pawn takes, knight takes, the bishops can be traded, and sometimes people don't want to play this. So a move here that you can try to play is something like e4 here. So e4 is stopping the bishop trade from happening. Anytime you have more space, you want to stop this. So he played rook f to d1, clearly saying he wants to play d4. Queen c7 gets played, rook to c1, rook to c8, and now pawn to d4. Once all the pieces are developed, we're going for that attack. And c takes d4, and because he did not play his e4 move earlier, again, if he just plays e4 here, pawn d4, knight takes d4 would be a very strong move. You can see the knight's going to b5 over here. This might have been a better try for him. But d4 gets played right away, pawn takes, and now interesting move. Rook takes on d4. The rook looks a little bit misplaced here, so I'm not totally fond of it, but it's definitely not going to be losing in this situation. Another idea he might have tried might have been something like knight b5, so we can take on d4 with this knight, getting a nice tempo off the queen. So rook takes on d4, d5 got played, and this is actually the mistake of the game. Here now white is just clearly better. And so what do you play here as white? That's my question to you. We start off with c takes d5. And here, if Jonathan played e takes d5, the game would have continued and it would have been interesting here. Although, again, we see the problem of the isolated pawn. It seems like in this round, the lower rates were having a hard time understanding the pawn structures. They just got outplayed here by their higher rated opponents. So, yeah, here, Unfortunately for Jonathan, he plays knight takes d5 and loses the game immediately. Hopefully you can calculate this win. Here we go. I wonder how long it took Prasanna to play this move. Knight takes d5 exclam. I'm pretty sure Jonathan did not expect that move because, well, can't we just take on c2 here? Unfortunately, he missed. The knight is going to take in check. So after queen takes on c2, knight takes in check, king h8, rook takes, and even worse here, the knight's going to be hanging at the end. Rook takes on d7. Oof. I'm sure Jonathan was not too happy with this move. Of course, he would take on b2. We're going to take over here on f3. The best thing you can try to play in this position will be bishop takes on f3, bishop takes on f3, and then rook takes. Here, white is still pretty much easily winning here. After rook takes a7, you have the extra pawn here, and your bishop's good. Your knight's your knight has an escape route, so he'll be getting back into the game very shortly. And then, of course, you have an extra pawn over here. So white is easily winning in this position. For some reason, I'm not too sure why. Maybe Jonathan just missed it. He went ahead and played bishop a6. And, yeah, now he's just down a full piece here. And it did not take long for him to go ahead and convert this to his win. He played bishop a3, threatening, of course, if rook takes a2. Man, watch out for Prasanna. He's a very nice tactician. Knight to g6. King to g8. Well, I guess you'll have to take here, and then the bishop can take on f8 here, right? That's the correct move order. So rook takes a2 can't get played. Rook to c8, and yeah, when you have one blunder, it's pretty common to have another one. Knight would just take here, and yeah, rook can take back, but he took on e2, and rook d8 is checkmate. And I'm pretty sure at this point, Jonathan just jumped on the sword here because, well, the game is not going too well for him. Well, this was the first round for the New Year's Open 2022. I'll be going over the other rounds later. Hope you enjoyed the first round. Sacrifice to the chess gods. I'll see you guys later. Bye.